There's really two ways that we can affect carbohydrate utilization in the body. One is going to be by directly inhibiting the enzymes that break down the carbohydrates. So let's go ahead and dive into what simple things you could add into your diet, really simple things, to start mitigating the effects of, well, not even high carbohydrate meals, just carbohydrates in general when it comes down to insulin and glucose. A quick background to understand how this works, and I know I've explained this in other videos before, but it's important. Glucose gets bound together into what are called starch chains. And if it's like this, each of my fingers is a glucose molecule and they're bound together. Well, enzymes come and they basically attack this and they break each individual glucose molecule apart from its bind, and then those glucose molecules then absorb and spike our glucose. Okay, that is in theory why lower glycemic foods with more longer starch chains and more glucose molecules are usually digesting slower, because they have to go, instead of saying boing, 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 they have to go boing, 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 boing. They have to undo a lot of the starch chain. Well, we can slow that breakdown even more by eating foods that slow down or inhibit the enzymes that break that down in the first place. And one of the first things that you can consume is curcumin. By adding curcumin to your rice, by adding curcumin to your potatoes, I mean, it really tastes good with rice and it makes sense, right? That is hugely impactful. There is something in curcumin called bis-dimethoxycurcumin. Okay? And there was a study that was published in the journal Food Chemistry that looked specifically at bis-dimethoxycurcumin, found that it is a pancreatic amylase inhibitor. And when subjects would consume curcumin along with rice, it attenuated the glucose response and the insulin response. But it's unique because it is what is called a non-competitive inhibitor. And this means that it doesn't really become selective about what it slows down in terms of carbohydrate breakdown. It just goes for it. Okay, so non-competitive means it doesn't say, oh, I can't work on that one, I can't break down. You know, it's not biased, it's not, you know, it's not having any kind of selection whatsoever. It just goes for it. That means that even a small amount of carbohydrate, a large starch chain, a small starch chain, curcumin can have a powerful effect. So it binds to all forms, even if starch isn't present, meaning it's one of the most powerful things that you can do to add to your diet in terms of like inhibiting these starch chains from breaking down. The next thing is cinnamon. And as I go down this list a little bit, I'll be able to explain like how you can combine cinnamon with certain things for a double whammy effect. Cinnamon is also an amylase inhibitor. Although it's technically not a non-competitive amylase inhibitor, it's a pretty powerful one. There's an interesting study published in the journal Agricultural and Food Chemistry that demonstrated that these particular compounds in cinnamon itself has what are called procyanidins. Okay, now they are indeed an amylase inhibitor. Then when you look at some other research, you can see it in effect. So there's a study that was published in the journal Phytomedicine, took a look at rice pudding. Subjects consuming rice pudding that obviously has rice, starch, along with some sugar probably. Okay, well, when subjects added just 3 grams of cinnamon to rice pudding, it significantly reduced the glucose spike and significantly reduced insulin concentration, meaning the body was able to handle it better, probably because this amylase inhibitor slowed things down so the body could deal with it even better. Super powerful. Okay, this next one works upon a different axis, which is fascinating. Sweet potatoes, and the more purple, the better. Okay, now sweet potatoes, you might be thinking, well, this is already a carbohydrate. Well, yeah, but you might want to consider having a small amount of sweet potatoes with other carbohydrates. If you're having some rice, maybe you wouldn't hurt to have a couple wedges of sweet potatoes or something. Okay, here's what's going on here. The Journal of Agriculture and Food Chemistry once again published a paper that showed that the anthocyanins, which is what makes a sweet potato more purplish, they actually act as what is called an alpha-glucosidase inhibitor. Okay, so amylase is one enzyme that breaks down starch. Alpha-glucosidase is another enzyme that breaks down those glucosidic linkages, the linkages between glucose, the links between glucose. So we're working in a different category here, potentially slowing down digestion. Now, my brain goes off, and I think one of the things that I really like is actually cooked sweet potatoes with a little bit of stevia and some cinnamon, making them kind of sweet. Think about that for a second. You're taking cinnamon that has this amylase inhibition effect, and you're taking sweet potatoes, which has an alpha-glucosidase inhibition effect. Combining those could be very, very powerful. So these little things that you can add, and I've got more things that we can talk about here in just a second. Okay. I put a link down below for Thrive Market, because Thrive Market has even sweet potato chips. Okay, and they also have some of these other things. They also have the ability to get curcumin, they have the ability to get cinnamon, they have the ability to get some of these other things we're gonna specifically talk about in this video. Now, I'm not saying this just to push Thrive, I'm suggesting that if you are trying to find maybe tastier options that you can start adding to your meals, I would recommend them. And the cool thing is, there is a link down below to save 30% off. Okay, it used to be 25, now it's 30% off your entire first grocery order with Thrive Market. That means you can load up your shopping cart through Thrive, okay, an online membership-based grocery store, load up your grocery cart and save 30% off your entire grocery order, plus you get a free gift up to $50 worth when you use that link down below. So 30% off plus a free gift using my special link down below just to do your grocery shopping. It's kind of a no-brainer. So anyway, that link is down below in the description. Okay, buckwheat. Now we gotta talk about buckwheat. All right, so buckwheat, God, such a dad joke, I'm sorry. Like 4 years ago, I became a dad, and suddenly my jokes got really lame and annoys everybody. But anyway, buckwheat is kind of interesting. So when you look at regular wheat versus buckwheat, and you look at the research, it's pretty flabbergasting. There's another dad thing. I would never say flabbergasting until I had kids. Once again, the Journal of Agricultural and Food Chemistry. Common theme here. I guess this journal really likes to look at this stuff. Okay, they found that when subjects consumed wheat bread versus buckwheat bread, same amounts, same amount of carbs, the buckwheat bread had way less of a glucose spike than the wheat bread did. And it's because of the amylase inhibition effect of buckwheat in and of itself. Buckwheat you can bake with, you can make bread with it, you can make a pie with it, you can I don't know, you could pour flour on someone with it, do the same kind of thing. It's kind of cool. So just start maybe getting rid of the refined flour and start using buckwheat here and there as just a way to start slowly increasing the amount of better carbohydrates that you put into your life. But now this next category is one that is called tannin-rich foods. Now, the cool thing is we can break this down into a bunch of different foods, but we can universally talk about what tannins do. Tannins get a bad rap because we think tannins are in things like black tea. And I'm thinking, okay, well, black tea stains my teeth. I don't want to drink black tea. Well, guess what? It's also in coffee, and coffee stains your teeth. Tannins do stain your teeth, okay? But if you're responsible with your oral care, it doesn't really matter, right? The thing is, tannins have a really powerful effect on amylase inhibition. And once again, just like curcumin, they are a non-competitive amylase inhibitor. So that means that they are powerful. So there's even some potential that maybe drinking some black tea along with carbohydrates could have an impact. Okay, you're basically slowing down digestion. Now, there's a study that was published in the journal Biochemistry and Biophysical Research that demonstrated straight up tannins are these non-competitive inhibitors. They are legit. So what are some foods that have tannins that you could add? Black tea. Again, black tea is really powerful. Okay, another one, mint. So adding mint, like when you cook up some chicken, maybe cook it up with like a mint and chicken, maybe not so much, but like mint along with sweet potatoes actually goes kind of good. But also rosemary, even basil, like fresh basil, like in a non-cooked form. So if you wanted to add fresh basil, that's a great way. And again, if you looked at the data, you could probably see it. Okay, but it goes beyond that. Okay, obviously the coffee as well, but then we have some other ones that are interesting. Berries. Okay, believe it or not, raspberries and strawberries have a ton of tannins in them. And I've done specific videos on how raspberries, like for a lower carb diet, are probably one of the best fruits you can eat because they don't seem to spike glucose very high and they don't seem to have a powerful effect on insulin. But the interesting thing is berries in and of themselves are cool, but combining them with other foods is even better. So like maybe try having some sweet potatoes with a couple of berries. I mean, all these different things that you can do. And it may sound like I'm just promoting eating a bunch of high carb foods, but no, the category here is not just about eating high carb foods. It's about how do we, A, get away with eating some of these higher carb foods and mitigate the damage. How do we enjoy our life by still enjoying some of these foods? But also, how are we keeping a close ear to the ground on what our body needs for longevity in terms of that glycolytic response? So we're not having glycolylated proteins, or not having advanced glycation end products from high glucose, and we're watching our HbA1c, we're watching all these things. It's important. So just to recap, curcumin, cinnamon, the tannins, so things like rosemary, the mint, the black tea, the coffee, okay, the basil, the berries, things like that. The sweet potatoes are definitely going to be a powerful one, and the buckwheat. These are my favorites to add into the mix. As always, keep it locked in here on my channel. I'll see you tomorrow.